All right. Welcome everybody to this session. Thank you so much to CFI for the great organization of this overall event and for this session in particular. My name is Eric Duflo. I'm going to be the moderator for this session, and I've been working on financial inclusion, regulation and supervision for 25 years, and I now lead CGAP's consumer protection work based in Washington, DC. I will soon introduce our great panel, but before I do so, I would like to say a couple of words on this session. We're looking here at the relationship between SupTech and consumer protection. The term SupTech is defined differently by different organizations, but I will rely on my colleagues from the BIS, who define it as the use of innovative technology by financial authorities to support their work. Big data and artificial intelligence are considered to be the main innovative technologies here. SupTech is a very important topic for consumer protection because consumer protection is often focused on, in terms of supervision, on collecting a large number of data, of qualitative data from many different sources, and it can be very cumbersome for the supervisor. So it can take a lot of resources. SupTech is therefore particularly relevant for consumer protection. It can help financial authorities collect more data faster and analyze it better. And it can also combine data from different sources. So yesterday I saw that my World Bank colleagues published a report titled SupTech Moving from Why to How. It means that people are no longer asking themselves the question, why is it so useful, but how to use it. And I think it's particularly relevant, as the report says, in times of COVID, because we've seen that technology is essential in times of COVID. And it's essential in terms of digital finance for people, but also for supervisors to do a better job. And CGAP is very interested also in this topic. In fact, we are exploring SupTech solutions for market monitoring as part of a toolkit that we're developing for supervisors to better analyze and monitor consumer risks in the financial sector. So let me introduce our three speakers. I'm going to take my notes here. First, Mariana Escobar. So Mariana is head of the Sustainable Finance Working Group at the Superintendencia Financiera de Colombia. With more than 12 years of experience, her work has been focused on issues related to financial inclusion and sustainable banking. Welcome, Mariana. Then we have, from the Philippines, we have Ati Charina de Vera Yap, who I'm going to call Cha during this session. She's the director of the Consumer Empowerment Group, CEG, Center for Learning and Inclusion Advocacies at the Banco Central de Filipinas, the Central Bank of the Philippines. She heads the CEG, which handles BSP's financial education and consumer protection work and advocacies. Finally, Simone Di Castri is an expert in policy development for financial and digital inclusion with a focus on emerging markets. He's an independent consultant, the director of the RegTech for Regulators Accelerators, and a research fellow at the University of Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. So welcome to this wonderful panel. And I'm going to start this session with a question for Simone. So Simone, actually, I have two questions in one. Why is SupTech so important for digital financial inclusion and for consumer protection? And what are the risks for supervisors of not adopting SupTech?
Thank you, Eric, and good morning, everyone. So why SupTech is so important, first in general, and then we can go into why for financial inclusion and why for consumer protection. When we do diagnostics and work with supervisors and regulators in the financial authorities that have the mandate to oversee the financial sector, what we witness is a lot of frustration and teams of professionals that really are dedicated to their work, but don't have the availability of the adequate tools to do what they are required to do by the law. The current situation is that the supervisory tools and methodologies are absolutely obsolete. They are not adequate for the supervision of the banking business or payment services. We see important delays in the validation of the data that are received by the supervisor from the private sector. For commercial banks, we see data that come from non-bank deposit-taking institutions that often do not receive validation because it takes really weeks or months. So we see critical challenges for prudential supervision. And when we talk about this, we see the risk for stability, the risk for the whole resilience of the financial sector, and therefore also for financial inclusion and consumer protection. We cannot talk about consumer protection and financial inclusion as far as we have financial services providers that have public deposits that are not prudentially supervised in an adequate way. We see challenges for anti-money laundering. It's incredibly weak anti-money laundering supervision. It's really data heavy, but the data are not there. And we see challenges with consumer protection that Chai and Mariana will describe probably more precisely from their point of view as supervisors. But definitely we notice that supervisors don't know much about the consumers. The consumer journey is not clear. The challenges and the experience of consumers is not clear. So on one side, we see guidance coming from the standard sectors asking, and that's correct, for risk-based supervision to be implemented, for proportional regulation. But what is missing is really the intelligence that allows regulators and supervisors to do their job. So, and that was already the case 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But now we are in a new wave of innovation from the private sector. Is the age of fintech, and supervisors are absolutely unprepared, both in terms of capacity, in terms of numbers. They still have to resolve the problems of the previous age, and the previous age has not gone away. Those entities to supervise product service channels are still there. And we have all the new channels, the digital native products, digital multinationals like Google, Facebook, Apple, that are entering the financial sector. And we are going to publish a blog with the CFI about this specific topic next week. There are not the tools to be able to supervise a digital and data heavy industry. The problem is global. I know that usually in our conversation we focus on emerging markets, but so many problems are shared by the United States, the European regulators and supervisors, and it's urgent because COVID has done only one thing, is made more urgent to address these issues. For example, if a customer needs to file a complaint, and now in many countries there are lockdown measures, there are physical restrictions, so they cannot go to a branch. So there are even less channels available than before. For a supervisor to supervise a deposit-taking institution, there's no on-site supervision available. So for those who are not technical, usually inspections are done once you identify a problem. You go as a supervisor in person to the branch of the bank and you spend then 3-5 days checking documents. You understand that with the physical restriction of movement and physical distancing, this is not possible. So we really need to reinforce the off-site supervision, what can be done from home or from the premises of the central bank for the supervisors. We see also some very encouraging trends. So there is a rising comfort around the adoption of new technologies for financial authorities. This is very important. It's something that is changing rapidly. The individuals that are in the central bank, they already use all the technologies that are needed because they are in any smartphone. What we're talking about is not something particularly creative. Like how the technology is packaged, it's something innovative in many cases, of course, leveraging the technology for doing some very specific things, but the technology itself, for many, are already things that we use every day. And on the other side, we saw many experiments like the one that we're going to discuss about the Philippines that are giving more courage to the financial authorities to experiment. So, and just 30 seconds to close, what is very important is the opportunity to democratize consumer protection. So making consumer protection available to every single financial customer, not only those who live in the capital and can go to a branch, not only those who use emails and can send an email to the supervisors. We see experiments where this is becoming available to everyone thanks to technology. And we will talk more about the details, whether it's for complaints or for other measures. And the opportunity is really to allow the supervisors to identify the problems early on, and then to focus their attention, the risk-based supervision, where the risks are becoming greater in a timely manner, not once the cows are already out of the fence, but where there is the beginning of a problem that we see arising. And this can be done, for example, with the chatbots that the BSP, chat for the BSP is going to describe, but also scraping, for example, terms of services from the internet to see whether the financial service providers are really reflecting in their documents that they're providing to customers what they're mandated to put in the documents by the law, or parsing information from social media using natural language processing to see if people are complaining in a particular way about the product, about the channel, just talking on social media in a certain way about some of our habits, some of our behaviors. They can turn on the light for the supervisor that actually there are some risks going on, and I'll be happy to go into the detail later. So we see risks and we see incredible opportunities, and I'm really glad that we have this opportunity to discuss this today. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Simone, and very good points on the great opportunities of SupTech. And I'll come back to you maybe after our two country examples, also on some of the challenges. Now, Mariana, let's travel to Colombia virtually, and I'd like you to describe your journey on SupTech, highlighting the benefits, but also the challenges you have faced. So let me ask you this first question. I have another question for you, but let me ask this one first.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting the superintendent to share the experience. Just before I answer your question, I just want to make sure to explain to everybody that we're just starting. It's the beginning of the journey. We first, in order to start and to really implement SupTech solutions, we first needed to kind of address some legacy issues we had with the supervision. So in that sense, we're just starting. But and I'm just going to tell the story from different perspectives, but especially from the financial inclusion perspective, which is the reason why I'm here. And our journey can be understood in three ways, or can be, can be dated to three, or can be tracked to three different reasons why we decided to start this journey. The first one, it's related to financial inclusion, actually. The government of Colombia, first of all, decided to start paying cash transfers programs through the financial system. So we had an increase in the number of adult population with at least one bank account. However, when we started to measure the demand side data, we started to realize that there were gaps. There were gaps that we weren't realizing, and it had to do with the perception of the people of their ownership. It could be, at that moment, we thought it could be related to the fact that we paid the conditional cash transfers via banks we selected. They didn't select the bank, we chose the bank as a government. But we wanted to understand more regarding why this gap was happening. What we also saw with the data, for example, is that even though women pay better, they behave better with their credit, they were accessing a little bit less. There wasn't a very big gap, but there was a difference, especially in the amount they were giving, they were getting as a loan, and on the interest rates that were higher. Yeah? So that's the first reason we started to realize that there were some issues that supply side data was not giving us. So we needed to understand a little bit better why. And in our case, via supervision, we have different entities in Colombia working on financial inclusion, but from the superintendencia, it had to be done through supervision, and especially consumer protection supervision. The second one was actually related to the digital products, no, and to the digitalization of products. So, and again, I can link it back to the conditional cash transfer. Most of these conditional cash transfers were paid out via digital products, and the cash in, cash out points were agent banks. And when you talk to the program that managed these conditional cash transfer programs, they will tell you there were certain conduct or certain behavior that was being adopted by the agent bankings, that in the case of Colombia, they are indirectly supervised. We do not supervise the agents directly. We supervise them through the banks. So, and we were not capturing that behavior. We were not able to capture that behavior, and we were not getting it via complaints, because this population is uneducated, it's unempowered, they really did not know, understand, and I think in some issue, in some cases, it's expensive to put the complaint in the old manner, in the old process. It was a little bit more expensive. So we weren't capturing this behavior. And last but not least is regarding actually our supervision. A lot of our manpower, human resources were assigned to complaint management, kind of one-on-one complaint management, and we didn't have enough manpower doing actual market conduct supervision, doing the consumer risk supervision. So we needed to change. We needed to understand. We needed first to align our complaints processes and our supervision processes to the new services, and we needed to be more effective. So. The second journey that I'm going to attach to, that it's attached and it's related to the reason, is that the superintendencia decided to start an innovation strategy, or to develop an innovation strategy. This innovation strategy had three elements to it. The first one was the regulatory sandbox. It started as a supervisory sandbox. It's probably this year is going to become a regulatory sandbox. The second one instrument was the hub, which is basically an office that can help fintechs and innovators understand the regulatory environment. And the third one was actually the Super laboratory, that I think, and I think this is very common with other supervisors, was a place or a space where we tested different solutions, technological solutions that the vendor offered us. So different vendors touch on our doors and say, let's test this or that solution and see if it works for your supervision purposes or for regulatory compliance purposes. And we started testing some ideas there, and it kind of started mobilizing the whole entity around these new ideas and these pilots that we were testing. The third and last point and the last step of this journey was actually related to our recommendations we got as a superintendencia, and it was associated actually to change the way we were supervising, because even though we had a consumer protection supervisor, we were not doing market conduct supervision. We needed to try to understand patterns and try to understand how behavior impact the trust of financial consumers. So we understood that new technologies and using, for example, artificial intelligence, machine learning will help us capture that behavior and change the way we conduct our supervision to understand really what is affecting the consumer experience in the financial sector. What have we done so far in the last couple of months? The first one was to strengthen our analytics department. We used to have a data management department or area, but we changed it to an analytics department. Besides creating a data governance and data management process, they also created an analytics cell, and one of the analytics cells is in the consumer protection area. The second one was to develop a smart supervision strategy. Smart supervision strategy focused mainly on improving first of all, was trying to improve the complaint process, the way we manage and handle our complaints. Like I said before, it used to be one-on-one. So we used to handle complaints, each individual complaints with each individual institution, and it was done manually, so via paperwork. So the first one was to change actually that process, and first, change the way people relate, the people that wanted to put the complaint to the superintendencia. We changed the interface, we changed the web page and the channels to which they could complain. We capture even more data because we also had data issues. The second one was actually changing the way we connected to the institutions. So for example, some institutions, the one in Colombia that are able to, can do it through APIs. They can send the complaints information, and we can send the information to them through APIs. And the last one is using analytics, no? So the analytics cells that I just mentioned, it's now in charge of analyzing the data and try to identify patterns in those behaviors, and to understand how the banks are responding to the complaints. The second, that's the second, sorry, the third one, and the third and last front was the Digital Financial Services Observatory, because one of the things we do understand is that digital financial services are going to change the way we supervise, especially around financial inclusion. It's very hard for us, and what we are seeing right now is that we're going to start to use different type of technologies and approaches to understand how banks are helping us with the financial inclusion objectives. And it has to be used through innovative ways, using non-structured data, alternative data, to really understand how these channels and services, digital services, are behaving. So the purpose of that Digital Financial Service Observatory is to kind of look into the future, try to understand how we should in the future start, and they will feed into the strategy of the superintendency.
So thank you, Mariana. One follow-up question, and if you can be brief in your answer, please, so that we can go to the Philippines also relatively soon. When I think it's extraordinary, the description of your journey. I thought it was super interesting. One question I had was, in terms of the SupTech aspect, in elaborating your strategy and all this, what has been the biggest challenge you have seen inside your organization that could slow you down in this journey, or is possibly the biggest obstacles for reaching your objective? Just one.
The first one was data quality, to be honest. The first one, the first challenge was data quality. We didn't have enough quality of data. We didn't have granularity. We didn't have, it wasn't updated. People couldn't actually link their complaint to a channel or to a service. So the first challenge was data quality.
Okay. Well, if you have a second one, you're allowed to give me another one.
Okay, I think capacity, knowledge and capacity within the superintendency, trying to attract talent that knew about those new technologies and that want to work at the financial superintendency is not easy.
Very good. This is very interesting. I have one last question for you before we move to the Philippines. What kind of actually, you know what? We'll move to the Philippines and I'll come back to the question later. So let's move to the Philippines, and I'm going to ask the same question from Cha. I think we are going to start, Cha, with a small movie, correct? And then I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Lauren, for your help. Well, I think if people can't reach the BSP, then we have a problem now, because it looks like you have a real amazing set of tools, Cha, now, to communicate with customers. I tried I tried the chat yesterday just to test, your systems, and it worked. And actually, I had a question. Yes, I had a question because, I was saying in the chat, I can't speak English, but I just realized that it's also, in local language on the presentation. So that answers the question I had. Now, maybe, Cha, same question as, for Mariana, can you describe your journey on SupTech and highlight the benefits, but also the challenges that you have faced, please?
Okay. Yeah. So, good evening, or I mean, good morning, everyone. So, it's evening now here in Manila. So, thank you very much for inviting me and for sharing that video about Bob. So, in response to your question, Eric, the BSP has embarked on this chatbot journey as early as 2018 as part of BSP's broader financial inclusion advocacy. So this is also consistent with our programs to make use of technological advances or innovations in the performance functions and to improve also our the delivery of the services. So in 2018, our monetary board has approved the collaboration with the RegTech for Regulators Accelerator, or R2A, which Simone is very familiar with, the development of a chatbot prototype for complaint handling mechanism. This consumer assistance mechanism, just to give you a short background, serves as a platform for filing complaints from consumers against financial institutions that the BSP supervises, like banks, credit cards, pawn shops, so those types of institutions. So it's facilitative in nature, which allows both parties to at least have an opportunity to talk with each other and hopefully resolve their concerns or the complaints. The chatbot solution, we are looking forward to having a more efficient handling of financial consumer complaints and making it available to more Filipinos. So this is consistent with the vision of our governor, Benjamin Jokno, which is to bring the central bank closer to the Filipino people. So as you've seen in the video, Bob is accessible through 3 platforms, which is the Facebook, our web chat, and especially the SMS or the text messaging. So this is in addition to our regular or usual access points for receiving complaints, which is via phone calls or meetings with face-to-face meetings with the complainants, and also sending postal mails. So they also use that for filing complaints. And also one of the features of the chatbot is, as you've mentioned already, it talks in English, in Tagalog, or in Taglish, which is a mix of the Filipino and the English language. So what motivated us to do this? Basically, for one, is to improve operational efficiency. So over the years, with the introduction of new products, including the digital financial products, we've seen an increase of complaints. But the number of our personnel or our staff remains the same. So there's like an imbalance there. We are receiving more complaints, but we have the same number of staff. So providing efficient and timely consumer concerns, effective and timely manner of providing assistance to consumer is becoming a challenge for us. Another objective why we did the chatbot is to democratize access of the public to our complaints handling mechanism. As we've noted, majority of our complaints are coming from Manila or the urban areas. We seldom see complaints coming from the rural areas or the provinces. So with the chatbot, especially the SMS feature, we hope to reach more people, especially those in the far-flung areas of the Philippines. And lastly, it would be to provide insights on consumer behavior and market conduct that we will gather from the data, objective why we embarked on this journey. So as you've seen, after a year of testing the solution, it became clear that we needed, and this is feasible for us. So we decided in early 2019, we decided to move ahead and procure the implementation, that chatbot, and to implement the same. A lot of processes hurdle the procurement process. So that's why it was only in March of 2020, during the height of the COVID, actually a day before the lockdown in Manila, that's the time when we had the project kickoff of the chatbot with our provider. So we had to do it virtually because travel restrictions were already in place. So as you can see, we've started this project even before COVID-19. And with the lockdowns and new working arrangements, there were new challenges in handling consumer complaints. And at the same time, we also saw that the consumers were having difficult time. As you've mentioned, they are having difficult time reaching out to their financial institutions as well as to us. So the potential and the importance of having a chatbot has become more pronounced during the pandemic. So Bob, as you can see, was officially launched in August 19. And then last September, we added another feature, which is the frequently asked questions for the whole of BSP, not just consumer protection department. So this is to promote and also to give more information about the BSP. And just to share, Bob has processed since July 30, Bob has processed 1,291 complaints filed by consumers. So now that Bob is up and running, I can say that we are now experiencing birth pains, so to speak. And among the challenges that we've seen thus far are of course, migration of the old system to the new system. How do we marry those two systems, which takes some time. And then, of course, retooling of personnel. We have to improve, we have to have new skill sets to navigate the new technology and the new processes. And we also had lesser information from the users, maybe because of the perceived limitation that when you see a chat box, it's a limited number of characters that you have to input while sentences about their complaint. So that's one of the advantages of the implementation. We still have a very minimal use of the chatbot. Users are still not too familiar with it. So we need to have more promotion or marketing of the bot. And of course, we have some adjustment stages for the users and also the specialists or our staff, which entails getting used to the system, adjusting processes and resources, including personal responsibility. So for the benefits, of course, with the AI and machine learning feature, Bob is able to respond to concerns real time and effectively decrease the turnaround time for complaints handling, which is our major problem with the current situation. It is also available and accessible 24/7. So anywhere, as long as you have internet connection or a phone, it will be available. It will also automate our repetitive and manual intensive tasks, but it will also give us insights on consumer experience and business practices. Right now, we are getting more information on customer demographics and profile, such as the gender and location. And all of these will serve as inputs to our policymaking and market monitoring work. Another advantage is, of course, it will free up our resources, and we will be able to reallocate or repurpose our staff to do other functions, such as policy development and market surveillance. And also, we've seen that with the new FAQ feature, Bob has become a platform for financial education. Okay, so we give out more information through Bob.
Great.
And another one advantage that we've seen is reduced carbon footprint. So we've been printing a lot of emails every day. Each email is printed, so it's around several thousand per year.
Very good.
And so we're saving more trees. So our journey doesn't end with the launch of Bob. We know that we still have a lot of things to do. our journey continues, and it may be a difficult one, but with the benefits and potential above that we're seeing, even at this early stage, we think that it's worth pursuing this solution. So that has been our journey so far.
Thank you so much, Cha. That was really interesting, and I think many people have heard about your experience already. So getting your story of the journey, was critical for us to understand. And maybe something important for the participants in this session, you can use the chat box in this. I should have mentioned it at the beginning. My apologies, but you can use the chat box in the Zoom to ask questions to the panelists, or even make comments about the topic of the day. So please don't be shy, and my colleague Lauren will help me maybe at the end if if we have a lot of questions to manage. But please go ahead. We really want to have some time. We'll keep the last 15 minutes of this session for a discussion with participants and also for conclusion. So maybe before we move to the discussion with the participants, if they have questions, I have another question, and maybe I'm going to ask Simone first, since you've not talked for a while. In terms of the kind of consumer risks that fintech and that SupTech can help monitor in the future. Simone, we've heard quite a bit about complaints, but are there other areas that you think are, SupTech is going to be helpful in terms of market conduct and consumer protection? You're on mute, Simone.
Thank you, Eric. So there are different areas. One is transparency, definitely, to be able to analyze contracts, for example, developing like the opportunity to develop preemptive models to really understand what type of patterns we see, and to intervene early on when problems are arising in a market. Also, the opportunities to understand what problems we see in other markets that another supervisor in another country may face. For example, in the case of COVID, now we've seen how important it's been, because we had data to understand how the curve works when it was first in China, then in Italy, then when it came to New York. Then we had enough data to understand a little bit how this pandemic works. And that was because we had data and data sharing. In the same way, we can see now, for example, how the loan markets is going to be affected in our country, if only we had the data and the dashboards to be able to share this information across the borders. There are also risks, to go just quickly back to your first question. What are the risks for supervision of not adopting, for supervisors of not adopting it, or what type of risks we see in the adoption? And some of the risks are definitely to see black boxes. So softwares that supervisors don't necessarily know or understand. And that's why it's very important with R2A we took what we say a nimble approach with continuous iterations, with weekly touch points between the supervisors and the developers of the solution, so that at the end, the supervisors in the Philippines, in Mexico that we work with, I think they know about the solution as much as the developers know. So they really know the nitty-gritty of the mechanism of these applications and software that they're going to use. There are risks about siloing the solutions, one for consumer protection, one for payments, another one for prudential supervisions, instead of having softwares that are really able to communicate and data sharing within the institutions. And in this, it's important to see, for example, the superintendents in Colombia to have an overall strategy, and for the standard setters to develop data standards, and something that we're going to discuss on November 4th during a webinar with FSB. We also see the risk of some authorities, those that are more in wealthy countries that are able to roll out solutions, and the ones in emerging countries being delayed. And so we may see the risk of more data sharing between some countries and leaving out others. So it's very important that the emerging countries receive the support for innovating their solutions that they need. And another big risk in this work is that, unfortunately, the procurement processes that public authorities have in place really tend to favor the bigger, more consolidated technology providers. And often these are not the most innovative providers. We just concluded the G20 tech sprint, and we saw 120 solutions presented by startups from all over the world. So there is so much innovation, but often these smaller firms don't have really the capacity to engage with public procurement processes. So we need to think also about innovation in that sense, so that we allow the supervisors to be in partnership with the most innovative providers.
Very good. Thank you so much, Simone. So, okay, so I was going to do a quick poll. So let's do it. We want to do a quick poll with the audience, and Lauren is going to help me. So the poll that you're going to get is going to be the following question. For the implementation of which consumer protection principles do you think that SupTech might be the most useful? You can only vote for one. So Lauren, I understand you're sharing the poll with the participants and you'll share the results, correct?
Yes, so for those watching on FeedLoop, you'll see next to this button that says stream at the top, you'll see a button called engage. So click on engage and you'll see the vote. After you vote, the results will come up. So far I can see we've actually had a number of people that have already contributed, and we have 43% so far, 50%.
Let's wait a little bit, because
for mechanisms for complaint resolution is coming out on top. Followed by transparency at 22%.
Let's wait one more minute maybe to have more voters. You know, we like to have a very democratic process here with as many voters as possible.
We won't close the polls early.
No, we won't close the poll early.
All right, oh, yep, we're getting a few more responses here.
They might change the result.
All right, it looks like it's settled in. Okay,
so tell us the results, please. Can you share it on the screen or not? No?
It might be a little tricky to share it on the screen.
Okay, just tell us then.
All the viewers on FeedLoop are seeing what I'm seeing here. We've got 45% have responded with mechanisms for complaint resolution as the top consumer protection principle that would be addressed with SupTech. Right. Followed by transparency at 36%, and a small number for responsible pricing and fair treatment of clients.
Very, very good, and quite consistent with the discussion we've had so far. So thank you very much to the participants. I think we're going to open it to the questions first, because you know, out of respect for the participants, I'd like to deal with their questions. So I think, Lauren, since there are not so many questions, I'm going to read them, and I think the panelists can also see them. The first question is, what do you think are the best ways to build in sustainability in RegTech solutions, both in terms of technical capacity, but also funding for these solutions? So any volunteer, well, you can think about it. I'm going to read the questions and then we can decide who does what. The second question is for Simone. So it's about, are you seeing a global trend by supervisors to take up solutions like BOB? Third question that we have, are the aggregated statistics related to complaints publicly available, so that clients can choose providers that are more respectful than others? So maybe the third would be for Cha, I think. The fourth one, do you have example of TripAdvisor type of publicly available agents rating that consumers could fill in based on their interaction with an agent? So I propose that Mariana handles the first question, if that's okay. What do you think about the best way to build sustainability, you know, in RegTech solution? We'll have Simone handle the third one and Cha handle the third one. And the fourth, you can choose.
Thank you. I love that you assigned me that question, because I wanted to build up on something that Simone was saying, which is completely true. And it's one of the biggest challenges. It's true, because I come from the private sector and I'm the public sector, but one of the biggest challenges for the public sector to really promote this type of innovation is the public tender processes we have to go through to select a provider. And you cannot really give additional points because it's innovative, or in Colombia, they try to give an additional points if it's a small enterprise, or a medium enterprise, but normally in Colombia, public servants are afraid of using smaller, not very well reputed organizations to do this service. So I agree. One of the things we try to do at the superintendency is create this RegTech lab, and we don't only test things with vendors. We open it for innovators to provide us with their information of their innovation. But to be honest, in countries like Colombia, we did not find so many trying to work on RegTech at SupTech solutions. The first solutions they come up with is something that's facing the consumer, some of them middle office through the banks, but very little or maybe none, that I can remember when I was at Innova, because I started my job at Innova at the Superintendencia, we're bringing solutions. So that brings me to the actual questions on sustainability. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, in a sense that if the government cannot really contract these services from smaller firms, then what's the reason or what's the drive for you to innovate in that area? And it's a very good question. I think one of the first things we have to do as superintendents or as government entities to really provide and promote this type of solution is to have the organizations, directors or head of the organizations buying, so he can promote change and permeate the culture around the whole entire organization, so we can change processes, politics, and see how we can include them. I think that's the first step.
Thank you very much. Simone, you're next. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And just to add one point, like one of the important things that we did with R2A was to de-risk this relationship between the vendors and the public authorities. So we took the procurement on us to be able to create both that sense of trust, because we were translating between the two, and there is a lot that you get lost in translation between the functional requirements, what the regulators and supervisors need, and what the tech specs that are then written down in a public tender are. So there was a very important thing that we did. Regarding Bob, so last year we developed a proposal together with Proto Sinitic, the company that provided the solution for the Philippines, in collaboration with I think 5 financial authorities in Sub-Saharan Africa, to develop a Bob in those countries. So a chatbot for consumer protection, and I believe this proposal is at the final stage of approval with possibly support from the African Development Bank. So I really hope that that will be approved, and that there will be more of countries in Africa that will be able to have this solution. And in some countries, the idea is to bring this solution to also to the next level, based actually on a proof of concept that we developed with the Superintendency of Colombia, to be able to have a white label chatbot. So in the Philippines, the chatbot is used by customers to escalate complaints to the central bank. The next level will be to have the same chatbot, the same systems available to all the banks, to all the payment providers, cards providers, and start getting information from the beginning. So that will be very important. And also about the TripAdvisor for agents, I believe there is something that the Philippines is trying to develop, probably with support from the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, that starts going to that direction. So we see a lot of innovation happening. This is very alive, and it's important that the donors, as we support new regulation, for example, often we have denied to think about the supervisory capacity. There is a principle that CGAP has shared for the last 20 years: do not regulate what you cannot supervise. So as we think about new regulation, as we think about fintech sandboxes, all these new things. Let's also think that there are supervisors that need the tool to be able to supervise those new expanding financial sectors. Millions of new customers that are brought into the financial sector need the support and the assistance that they deserve.
Thank you very much, Simone. So from now on, we have 7 minutes left, and we can't go above time. I have checked. So I'm going to be very strict with time going on. So because we have a few more questions, and I think it'd be nice to do as many as possible. So Cha, can you respond very quickly about question number 3 about the aggregated statistics, please, and then we'll take another couple of questions.
Okay, unfortunately in the Philippines, the aggregated statistics related to complaints are not made publicly available, because on the part of the central bank, we have our confidentiality provisions, which is provided in our charter. So that's one of the setbacks of having this information, but not publicly available. But we do use this data for supervisory purposes. And of course, with social media and everything being posted in the Facebook or wherever, so the public gets a sense of which financial institution gets a lot of complaints, just by reading the web page or even the Facebook page or Twitter. So that's one of the, I think, advantages of having this social media. But for now, the aggregated data from the central bank is not publicly available.
Very good.
But disclosure and transparency,
okay,
is required for all financial institutions.
Mariana, do you want to add something on this question of availability of aggregated data?
Yes, we do have publicly available data,
You have
aggregated data on complaints.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, and we have to put it up in a portal that it's not even the superintendencies, it's called Open Data Portal at the government. But again, since our problem is data quality, that data is not being used. And actually, it's not actually for the consumer, it's more for developers, innovators that want to use that data to design something, it's not, when you download the data, I guess it's really complicated to really understand or use it as a decision making.
Okay. Okay, we're getting more and more questions. I don't think we'll be able to get, to all the questions. We'll take one more. How can regulators manage exclusion and drive choices through the technology usage? Anybody wants to answer this one? I mean, Mariana, you already touched about it with the fantastic example of women paying higher interest rates earlier on. Any other, anybody wants to comment on this question? If you do it, you have to do it fast. Mariana, you want to comment?
I can do it, yeah. I think technology, if I understood the question correctly, right? Because it's if technology enables more exclusion, yes. Women, what we see.
I think it's
for example,
how can technology prevent exclusion? Yeah, that's the way I understand. That's the way I read it.
Usability, consumer experience. To be honest, technology can enable better consumer experience, more products that are designed for the needs and purposes of certain population, specific population. So that's their power. I mean, there's also caveats to it, and there's also risks, but that's the main power of, I think, technology and the use of technology for financial inclusion.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much to all the panelists for this amazing sharing of experience. I'm just going to do a very quick wrap up of the session before we say goodbye. I think 3 areas that I thought were really interesting in our discussions: opportunities of SupTech for financial consumer protection, challenges, and recommendations. So I took notes during the discussion. And in terms of the opportunities, things that I've heard from you, who have so much experience, first, supervisors can better understand consumers. And that was very interesting about the, better use of disaggregated data on women with the example from Colombia on credit, but also better understanding of the rural population through the chatbots, in the Philippines, going beyond the capital city. Another opportunity is to provide early warning of issues happening in the market to supervisors and regulators. The fact that is going to bring more efficiency in the data collection and in the data analysis. It's also going to reduce costs for supervisors. Both Colombia and the Philippines have mentioned about the better use of man or woman power in the supervisory authorities. It provides real-time information and enables more of a dialogue also with consumers. So lots of opportunities for SupTech in financial consumer protection. We also saw that it was very useful for complaints and for transparency. Both Simone and the poll showed that. In terms of the challenges, we heard many things, but what I took note of is the issue of data quality. We need better data quality for SupTech to be efficient, but SupTech can also contribute to better data quality. So it's a bit of, but it's definitely an issue to be aware of. The capacity of the staff was mentioned by both of you, Mariana and Cha, and it's a very important issue, how to have the right staff, how to build their capacity. The migration of all systems to new one also came up. That was, very interesting. I mean, I'm raising the question, can some countries leapfrog in this context? And the other one that was raised by the Philippines, the low use also, can be an issue. So how do we market, some of these instruments to the public? And Simone, I think, mentioned the loss of control, the potential loss of control. I think what you call it the black box, which is very relevant because the last thing we want is to lose control over our own, supervisory instruments. And the sustainability issue was also raised as an important one that we need to keep an eye on. In terms of the recommendations going forward that I've heard, the standardization of data is very important. Having a strategy to put in place SupTech is also important. I heard also the need to to get the buy-in from leadership to get this going. And the last one, I will not do self-advertising here, but don't regulate what you can't supervise. So thank you very much to this wonderful panel. Thanks again to the participants and to CFI for this session. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities to discuss this super important topic. Thank you, everybody. Have a great end of the day and great weekend. Bye-bye.